Hi everybody, Army P here for Explorminate.net, and welcome to my first video called Stellaris Strategies. Now, the reason I made this video is because there has been a lot of strategies that have differed from vanilla to the current patch at 1.3 that we're currently talking about today. Now, some of the different strategies in vanilla 1.0 were incredibly viable and awesome, like slavery. And now that patch 1.3 is out, and it's been out for quite some time, a few weeks, month, I find that certain strategies are no longer viable, aka strategy. So I've been playing around, and I think that I have found easily the most OP strategy for Stellaris 1.3, as long as you don't mind doing the old-fashioned colony rush. Now, I'm a 4X gamer veteran and a grand strategy newbie. So when I kind of found this build, reading a little bit online, I can't say that it was completely, my idea. I just took some of the different strategies that I found worked for me and my playstyle personally, and integrated with some of the things I read online, and I found a build that I really like. So without further ado, I'm going to show you guys how this works and why it works so damn good. Okay, we're going to create a new empire as always. Now the only thing that really applies here is the traits. Now, a lot of different traits. I know that at the very beginning when I first started playing Stellaris, I almost always chose some type of trait like intelligence that would give me, plus 10% to my engineering, physics, and society output. Viable, don't get me wrong, not going to say it's a bad choice, but what I found was this is the absolute best trait of all. Extremely adaptable. Now the reason extremely adaptive is so awesome is you'll notice here it gives me plus 20% to my habitability. Now, understanding the mechanics of Stellaris a little bit, you're typically going to have an 80, 60, or 40, or 20 and in terms of your habitability to different types of planet types. Okay. Right off the bat, when you first start the game, you're probably only going to have your current home planet that you started from, plus 1, 2, or perhaps 3 different planets that you're going to be able to colonize right away. Once you kind of go outside of a specific zone, there's a smaller chance of perhaps some 60% planets in that general area. Now, 60% when it comes to your habitability is your baseline. You can't go any lower than that without suffering a penalty to your population's happiness and of course its production, etc. It just ends up colonizing them too early, ends up becoming a hindrance to your economy. They don't add anything in it, and generally it's just a no-no. But extremely habitability plus 20% gives you an incredible amount of choices. Now these choices are, first off, your 80% planets will go up to 100%, and it means that you don't have to worry about habitability there at all. But what it does is that it gives you that third rank where everything that was currently at 40% is now at 60%. So you're able to have 3 more different planet types that are going to be have an option for you to colonize right off the bat. No additional tech needed. Now the reason this is going to be effective is because in Stellaris, if you're playing with a standard map with a standard number of AIs around you, you'll always end up having 1 neighbor or perhaps 2 that is unbelievably close. Now the starting of every Stellaris game is very similar. You got your home planet, 1 or 2 planets nearby that you can colonize right away. No disadvantage. It'll probably be habitability 80%. Now, if you're really lucky with this extremely adaptive, I shouldn't say really lucky, it's like a 66.7% chance or something like that. Math, awesome. Anyway, you're going to be able to take his planets away from him. Because you're extremely adaptive means that even if he's a different planet type, a difference away from you in terms of the 3 different tiers that you have, you should be able to, there's a huge chance that you're going to be able to colonize it before him. So again, this build that I'm going to be talking about when it comes to everything that we're going to go carry on forward is about if you're a 4X gamer, it's the early rush and forward settling. If you don't know what that means, it means is that you instantly find out where your closest neighbor is, find some prime real estate right next to his back door, take your colony ship or your settler, whatever the case may be, go as close as you can to his borders and plop him down right next door. Now, that really ticks off a ton of people. If you're playing Civ 6 right now, you know what I'm talking about. Well, the AI, it will be absolutely crippled, because then what you can now do is you can take from that location and you can slowly backfill all the different planets from your early location that you plop down right next to his borders and carried on. It's incredibly effective, and it gives you a lot of different options. Unfortunately, because the extremely adaptive takes 4 points, you will have to feed yourself with a couple negative ones. So what I chose to do in this case was take slow learners, which is a -1 trait. It will give you minus 25% for your experience build. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's one of the easier ones to take. Does mean that you're going to have to kind of pass up on some of the different situation logs that might come into your game if you need a level 2 or 3. It is a hindrance, but again, because these random anomalies are a roll of the dice, it's very difficult to quantify if it's actually something bad or good. It all depends on the map that you end up with and what you have available around you to research. The second one I like to take is weak. It does give you a minus 20% army damage and minus 5% minerals. Now, the reason this could be, quite crippling, and at least with the 5% minerals, that's a new addition, I do believe, in 1.3. Before it was just minus, 20% army damage, so I took it every time because I just built more armies. I really had no bearing on what I did, right? But the 5% minerals changes the dynamics a little bit. But the reason this is such is not important, and I'll explain later on more as we get into our governments and ethics, is because with early adaptive, you're going to be able to colonize way more than anybody else unless they have this specific trait. Meaning that you're going to have the largest empire, bar none, as long as you are aggressive in producing colony ships. You're going to be able to take nearly every planet outside of, I believe, 3 or maybe 4, depending on the situation. They might get a tome world, but you're going to be able to colonize almost anything right off the bat. And if you're aggressive with your colony rushing, you're going to be able to cripple one of your neighbors right off the bat and backfill in all that you have. The amount of colonies you're going to have, you're going to be relying heavily on the sector AI. But that being said, this 5% mineral reduction means nothing. Okay, so we're going to carry on a little bit. So again, first thing you do is pick the pretty lady up here, an awesome flag and continental world. All aesthetics, doesn't really matter. But the first racial trait you have to take is extremely adaptive. The choices I took to top myself up, because I only get 2, I had to take 2 negative traits, is slow learners and weak. Now, government ethics. This is, again, we're talking about tactics here, right? So there are going to be some things you're going to have to bypass and not be, you're not going to have a fuzzy, warmy feeling on here. The bottom dollar is that if you're going to fire out colony ships all over the place, especially to your closest neighbor, you're going to have border friction. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. You're going to have more than everybody else around you right off the bat. Border friction is going to cripple you in terms of being friendly and lovey-dovey with people. So if everybody's ticked off of you, why not choose Xenophobe? Bam. That is a choice that you're going to make. Now, I'm going to pause right here and just explain why. There's 1 or 2 ways that you can do this. You could take Fanatic Xenophobe or regular Xenophobe, and you can actually interchange that with the next trait that I'm going to talk about. Now, I just chose Xenophobe because early game's already so powerful that I didn't want to hype it up too much. But the big reason that we're going to be picking on this is because is the planet border exclusion. Okay, huge. 10%. My border is going to be 10% bigger than yours. Add that on to the fact that I'm already able to take damn near any planet that I choose, means that I'm going to have a massive amount of borders. It's going to be bigger than anybody unless they have this exact build. That has happened to me, by the way, because I've built 2 different races and had them shown up, pretty close to me. We had easily the 2 biggest empires and the 2 biggest borders. The most planets, the most pops, biggest borders. Okay. That being said, everybody's going to hate you because obviously you're xenophobe, so which means that everybody that doesn't like you plus 5%. But the biggest one is alien slavery tolerance. So if you meet any individualist nation, any nation that prides themselves on individuality, democracy, they're not gonna like you. Don't care, because quite frankly they can pound sand in the sand factory, because you were going to have the biggest planet, all the most planets, the biggest borders, the biggest economy. So if they don't like you, tell them to beat it. Now, to complement this, when it comes to your next choice in ethics, I always choose Fanatical Spiritualist. Now, the reason that I do that is because obviously we kind of already recapped, we're going to have the most planets. It gives you a growth minus 15%. So I'm going to be growing faster than almost everybody, unless there's a specific build out there. But for the most part, I'm going to have more planets, and I'm going to be producing more pops than anybody else, within reason. The biggest one I'm choosing, though, is because although my Xenophobe is great for early, it complements early adaptive for early game. The reason I chose Fanatic Spiritualist is because of ethnic divergence. Big one. Now, I'm not going to go off on a tangent too much, but if you don't know what ethnic divergence is, it's a percentage of a chance that the population that you absorb, let's say, into your empire, either by war or making them your vassal or whatever the case may be, there's a chance that if your ethnic divergence is higher than theirs, the difference between those two ends up being a percentage, and normally ends up being 10%, it's like 1% per month or something like that. I'm not 100% sure on that, but what happens is that percentage means that that population has a chance from perhaps going from their original, let's say, individualistic, let's say that they end up being a collective, pacifist or whatever the case may be. They can actually go from that into being a spiritualist or a xenophobe. The reason that's important is because then their ethics will match with yours, and they will become more happy. This is actually more effective than enslaving the entire race in general. Enslaving them is an incredibly long and drawn out and painfully resource intensive projects where you're constantly paying to suppress them or to make them happy. They're never producing at the rate that you want them to, unless you've specifically chosen a very interesting number of paths. That's not nearly as powerful as this, as far as I'm concerned. What I want to do is I want to conquer a planet, and they will be ticked off for 10 years, which is the modifier. 10 years is the modifier for a population to be recently conquered, which is minus 25% happiness. You can't change that. It is what it is. But after that 25 years, during that 25 years, I've had, a huge amount of opportunity to actually change the ethics of the entire population, meaning that the amount of angry pops I have on recently conquered planets are going to be significantly less. Now, I obviously talked about this build being a forward rush colony base. Well, we're going to have to go to war. There's no doubt about it. And that's why I'm choosing Fanatical Spiritualist, because I need to have, I'm not going to have any friends. I'm going to have a lot of border friction. No one's going to like me because I'm a xenophobe. So war is going to be a part of the mid-game that really takes effect. This is going to complement that mid-game point where you're going to look around and say, that guy's got 3 planets, I've got 9, he's in my way, I got to take care of him. Well, you don't want to have to spend a ton of influence points mucking around trying to get them to either submit to you or whatever the case may be. You want to throw down and say, I have an awesome society, join mine. And that's where ethnic divergence comes so into play. And because you're going to be fanatically spiritualist, there are going to be different ethos and different technologies that even increases that number higher, which is very important for, again, the mid-game. And additionally, if your influence points, you're going to be thinking, you're saying to yourself, oh, ethos are so expensive. But being, of course, xenophobic means that you get more rivals, so you're going to be able to make someone your rival and gain more influence that way. Now, when it comes to government types, now that we've got our 2 different types of ethics chosen, before I move on to that, I actually think you can probably mix and match these 2 between Fanatic Xenophobe and just normal Spiritualist. Shouldn't be a problem. The biggest emphasis being is where you want to focus. If you want to focus very aggressive early game, Going Fanatic Xenophobe, because you can see here, the planet exclusion is huge. It's like, you know, plus 30%. Your borders are going to be massive. Of course, everybody's going to hate you even more, which means that, you know, you've been fighting a war on multiple fronts, but your mid-game's going to suffer because you can see here your ethnic divergence is only going to be 10, so you're going to be spending a lot more on subduing some of the populations that you've taken to be, you know, going from, you know, someone that you've become a new friends with to true patriots. By the way, I saw a video on that today and I laughed and I thought it was awesome. My personal preference, of course, is Fanatic Spiritualist, because I like my mid-game to be a little bit more smoother, and my Xenophobic, meaning that I pay more attention to the small game, or to the beginning game. Now, when it comes to government types, lots of different options here. Easily the best one for this type of playstyle is Plutocratic Oligarchy. Oligarchy? Yeah, it's pretty close. Anyway, I'll take it. That being said, the reason we want this is because our borders are going to be massive. They're going to expand very quickly at the very beginning of the game. So much so that we're going to be struggling to try to keep up with the new amounts of potential mines, energy mines, and different research stations that we can build in space. Now, you'll notice here that we get plus 5% energy, plus 5% minerals, which will offset our choice in being, our negative choice of being weak, where we lose that. But the mining station costs at minus 25%. That's huge. It means that right off the bat, we're going to be able to build a mining station for slightly less, I believe, than 40 minerals versus up to and including, like, you know, 85. Like, it's going to be very, very cheap to build these. Now, with our borders being so huge and our planets available to us being so massive, this is huge. It means that we're going to be going from the red to the black very quickly. It means that these stations are going to pay off themselves faster, and our economy is going to go faster, and everything, we're going to just be much larger than any other economy. Now, the reason that's important is because one of the downfalls of this entire strategy that I'm showing you is that your science will suffer. Because of the way that science works when it comes to some of the modifiers, is that if you have, let's say that you have 100 physics every turn. So every month you get 100 physics points. Now, for every one of those populations, or every one of the planets that you own, you get a modifier of minus 10%. Right? So then you know, if you had one planet, you'd have 90%. So you'd be getting 90 out of 100. Every population that you have on that planet, you end up at 1%. So if you had 10 population on this particular planet, you'd have a minus 20% to your total science output. Now, because of the way that this works when it comes to your habitability and your border exclusion, you're going to be having tons of planets. You're going to have massive amount of planets. Like, I can't even tell you. Like, play with this build. You're going to totally see that. So your science output is going to tank. I played with this build at least 3 separate times, to the mid-game point, 1 to late game, and I always ended up being behind at least 2 empires on science. I just could not keep up, even with building significant amount of science-based planets that did nothing but built enough food and science. That's enough to upkeep them the entire time. I still was behind empires. You just cannot keep up. So the few races that you will find out there that want to be friendly with you, definitely get with research agreements, even if you're taking a bit of a cost. The plus side to this being, of course, is that even if you had, you know, a neighbor who is above you in tech, they will not be anywhere close to you when it comes to your size and your numbers. You're kind of getting the Zerg mentality where, you know what, you don't have the tech, but you got the numbers. You can have 50 battleships with the best tech. Well, you got 200 battleships with okay tech. That's the payoff. So in this strategy of being very aggressive with your colony rush, and knowing that you're not going to have a lot of friends, but your economy is going to be the absolute largest and the most viable and diverse, this is easily the best build that you could possibly do. So just to recap, with your traits will be early adaptive. You can trade these two as you personally see fit. I chose slow learners and weak, which minuses our player experience gain, and our army damage minus 20%, and of course minerals, and of course government and ethics. I took Xenophobe, Fanatic, Spiritualist, and Plutocratic Oligarchy. I got it, Oligarchy. Bam! Nailed it. So anyway, play around with this build. Have fun with it. I had, out of all of the builds that I've currently played with, this is the one I enjoyed the most because I was able to get such an aggressive jump on the AI, which is very difficult in Stellaris. You play a typical 4X game, there's a lot of different intricate ways that you can choose a strategy to get a really good advantage over an AI, which is of course very needed when it comes to playing some of these games on higher difficulties. But Stellaris, the way that they've kind of designed all of these different variables, especially when it comes to science or things like that, where if you expand too much you get crippled, I find that it equals out quite a bit more, where taking that early advantage is quite difficult. This build is an incredible advantage early on. In fact, if you play on normal, you're gonna crush some early empires. It's gonna be a lot of fun for you, especially if you play on a medium map. Larger map, if you play on a large map, you'll find that there will be some larger empires you'll find later on that will equal your size, especially if you've got a conglomerate of different types of smaller nations that have bound together in defensive pacts. But that won't matter to you because you're going to be the biggest and you're going to be the largest and you're going to have the biggest borders. Okay, everybody, it's my personal opinion on what might be the best build for Stellaris 1.3. If you think that I'm wrong, or you think that you've got a better build, fire it in the comments section below. I'd love to hear about it in detail. If you want to talk about it more in detail and you want to get a discussion going, you don't want to do it on YouTube's platform, you can always join us on our Steam forums for Explorminate. We've always got great discussions going on there. And hey, kick us back and try us out at Explorminate.net, where we have weekly podcasts that keep you up to date on all 4X and grad strategy games. This has been Army P, and thanks a lot for checking my video out of Strategies of Stellaris. And if I don't make another one, I will see you guys back here when the patch 1.5 or 1.4 drops. Okay, everybody, this has been Army P, and I'll see you next time.